Splashin Siren Crew, Season 10 starting now. What's Splashin'? Welcome to Season 10, Episode 8 with me, your host, Lashanti the Siren. Today is actually the last live episode of Season 10, and today's guest is no stranger to the show either. We have Nicholas Fox, aka the Compost King of Soul and Soil. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lashanti. Thank you for welcoming me. It's really awesome to be back here. And 2 years?
Yeah, wow, yeah. 2 years.
Yeah.
I think you had just started your launch.
Yeah, they were probably like poking up like antennas.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. That is a lot of perspective, and I'm definitely excited to dive in and get some updates about what's happened since then. But first, just for any of the new viewers, let's hear about you, a brief introduction, what you did to get to the point of being the Compost King.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Happy Easter if you're watching. Thank you so much for coming in, having me on the show again. My name is Nicholas Fox. I'm a composter, officially a CCOM, a Certified Compost Operations Manager, permaculture designer, and founder of Soul and Soil. I've been composting for about 10 years now, since I was 15. And I got my start in composting, remembering I would go on YouTube and type in off-grid living, tiny homes, all of that type of stuff. And everybody's like, I have a little homestead garden. And they would talk about this thing called compost. So I remember my parents that year wanted to start a garden, and they had these plywood boxes with blue tarp lining and Miracle Grow. It was probably 6 to 8 inches, and nothing would grow. So I said, let me try this composting thing. And I started putting food in a bin, and that's how I started. Later on, going to college, seeing all the food waste, having a job, working in a hotel where I would be in charge of inventory. You see all this food coming in, and that something inside me is like, this is wrong. We could be making so much soil for so many different reasons. And that inspired me to start. During the pandemic is what really got me going into the business side of things. So we really started off on a strong foot in the terms of testing out what people were interested in, how prices worked, and it went on from there.
I actually love that story, and I can't remember if you told that last time. It definitely feels like that's the first time I'm hearing it, and that's so inspiring. I think you saw a need and you found a way to fill it. And I know you were here on the last episode talking about the permaculture and composting. Can you tell us what is composting again, and then what is that permaculture design that you referenced before?
Okay, so there's a couple definitions, especially now, becoming certified and understanding how people view compost around the world. From a business manufacturing standpoint, it is the aerobic digestion of organic material to produce a living product for your soil that feeds your soil. And I had this memorized, but now I'm blanking on it. We're applying biological principles to decomposition. So what that means is we are creating an environment where microbes, bacteria, and fungi want to come in and digest things, secreting acids, getting cozy, multiplying, and however they proliferate. And that causes a lot of heat to generate in this organic matter, which acts as a form of catalyst in a chemical change, which is the aerobic decomposition. So once that happens, your organic matter is now chemically changed and much more available to your plants and your soil. It really ties in the soil ecosystem. And permaculture, which is permanent culture or permanent agriculture, is a system, is a design system where we look at what we have in the land. We understand our weather patterns and our societal culture as a whole, and we create a form of agriculture that is very, cohesive with our way of life, the weather patterns. So we're not really working the land, we're working with the land, and we're just using our great understanding of observation to affect the land in a very positive manner. So we're trying to grow for abundance, not profit.
I love that. I know one of the things that I'm very, very excited to ask you about, and I'm sorry that I didn't put this in the discussion points before, but I want to call to the flyer that I've had circulating around in that shirt that you're wearing.
That's my favorite shirt.
Yeah, rats hate you because you compost. Why? Why would rats hate you for that? I'm very curious. Because from people that I know, they've actually had issues with rats in their compost.
That's true. I wouldn't call, well, I hate to be a stickler, but when you understand compost from an energy standpoint, we take this energy, we use energy to produce this food, and compost is the transformation of that energy that was suitable for us to be now suitable for plants and soil. Mm-hmm. A rat is a leak in the energy system because they are also taking that food and eating it and using it to like proliferate. But when I compost, I hot compost, right? So we have like, my piles get up to like 140 degrees and it smells delicious. Recently, I've started composting. You would be surprised. I've started composting meat, and because my temperatures are so hot for so long, this creates an environment that the rats can't touch. It's like if you had to walk on hot lava as like degrading food waste. It's 140 degrees is very hot for people. Yeah. So it like slow cooks. And then you have like, I remember I walked in my backyard and there was this strong scent of baked chicken. And it was like, that's so weird. But it can be nasty if you don't do it right. And that's why the rats come, because there may be cold pockets in your compost and the rats are going to burrow in your compost and find that food. I've had it happen a couple of times, but now like that has been under control in these like newer piles, and you don't see any rat activity anywhere.
Interesting. And actually, I had no idea, and I'm going to apologize because you reminded me, you were on the show 2 years ago, so I hope I'm not repeating old questions, but I thought that you could not compost meat.
Well, see, anything that's actually biodegradable can be composted. And I don't want to use like biodegradable in the sense how everybody else uses it, but through actual biological processes that are relative to our time and not multiple generations, it breaks down. But yeah, if you can go on YouTube and type in mortality composting, that's the farm definition of it, where you can compost livestock. But that's like very involved, very high capital. There's a guy who has like a truck and it's like 100 pigs. And they have these compost turners and they bury the pigs in the like compost windrow and they turn it. And 5 weeks later, it's just bones. And the bones you can break them with your hands. So that's how slow.
I'm pretty strong. I could break bones with my I could break bones in my hand already, but that's fascinating. The imagery is a bit weird.
Oh yeah, at first it's like, and then you just realize like, oh, this is crazy.
Yeah. But it sounds like it is a better solution for any sort of like waste, obviously, that comes from the meat production industry, though.
Yeah, I mean, like there's other inputs like bone meal, but you just have a whole carcass. If you have enough soil, just turn it up a little bit.
And you have to keep it turning?
Yeah, so in compost, like in this in the US Composting Council, I guess guidelines, you're gonna want to have to maintain a compost level or temperature of 130 degrees plus for about 15 days. And that way, like your compost can get certified as OMRI certified. And that process is called PFRP, Path for Reduction of Pathogens. Because let's say we are composting meat, there's a large chance if you compost incorrectly for Salmonella and E. coli to spawn out of that rotting meat.
Yeah. Yikes. I know we do have a comment about last episode. D'Angelo says, my takeaway from the last show's episode is that permaculture is teaching chickens how to And I don't quite remember why he would have had that takeaway. Does that ring any bells to you?
Yeah, it does. I think we're using chickens as a system where
Mhm.
you have something like a chicken tractor, and you take chickens in a coop that's a mobile coop, and what they do is they scratch the soil
Mhm.
for bugs. So they're taking out weeds, they're aerating your soil, and they're using their manure as a drop-in fertilizer that gets processed rather quickly. And you can do that over a period of weeks on different plots of land. And instead of you having to weed your farmland, take out pests or whatever, your chickens are doing it all for you. And you just have to, every couple of weeks, push the tractors out and feed the chickens, maybe a little supplement here or there. So, yeah,
Fascinating.
permaculture is
And
lazy farming.
lazy farming. Wow. It sounds like lazy, maybe physically, but definitely not mentally. It sounds like there's a
No,
lot of mental work that goes behind that type of farming. So,
yeah, definitely.
yeah. And
One
I
of my
know,
favorite quotes is
mhm,
think 1,000 hours, work one.
think 1,000 hours and work one.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't think I've ever heard that quote, but it does resonate. Hmm. Oh, that's like touched me just now. I want to start diving into talking a bit more about composting and then the work that you've had in waste management. But we do have a question from the audience about composting still. And it's from Amber, who actually was recently on the show. Do you have any tips for
Hi,
people who
Amber.
want to compost at home? Oh, yes. Hi, Amber. But yeah. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, I would say the best part about composting at home, or the best tip, is to always think about surface area when you're composting. So when you understand, like, if you have a banana, you like there's only so much surface area, normal banana. But if you mush it up into like a pudding, there's more surface area. So
Hmm.
maybe you might want to get a cheap blender for your compost, um, and blend up your scraps, and that way you have more bacteria, more fungi, more decomposition per surface area, and that helps with things to break down quickly. um, yeah.
So, do you think, and just to the example of composting meat, is that something that people can typically compost on their own at home, like in the basic composting styles?
I There is a way to do it, but like you should be more experienced. I
Mhm.
wouldn't tell, I don't want to tell anybody to start putting rotten meat in their backyard. um, So for now, no, but I would love to show the audience as we develop composting more as a culture,
Yes.
how to compost meat.
Yeah, no, that's and I asked because I think it's important to make sure we make that distinction of yes, we just said you can compost meat, but if you have a simple kind of composting system at home, what are some of the things that you would recommend? Hey, well, you have this simple thing going on at home. Don't do this. Don't do that. Like,
Yeah, there's I'm sure I have some posts on my Instagram at the Compost King, but to keep it brief, you want to keep your toilet tissue rolls, like the inside rolls, if they're pure cardboard, you want to keep some of that office paper with less ink on it. Your vegetable scraps, your fruit scraps, um, maybe some used cotton, like 100% natural cotton that's not too heavily dyed. And these act as good browns. Your yard trimmings, and like I said, your fruit and vegetable waste. Your water when you're washing rice, great
hmm,
compost, great compost
great
activator.
for your hair.
Yeah, I heard. I'm about to try that on the locks and see what happens.
Definitely. I've done it on my hair. Rice water is really good for your hair. And I know we do have another question about composting. And D'Angelo asked, what's the goal of composting? Is it just to make fertilizer?
That's a great question, D'Angelo. Thank you. There's a few goals of composting. So one, it depends on what perspective you're looking at. And I wouldn't call compost a fertilizer. It's more of a solution to poor soil, because every soil is a good soil. It just doesn't have the life to operate at at its like capacity. So once you have that microbial activity, which what I guess that would be the goal of compost, creating a diverse group of microbes, they can work on the soil. But the overall goal of compost, it has so many use cases that using it is always better than not composting, especially when we're thinking about landfill. So from a societal view, we're looking at compost as a waste management problem, an efficiency solution to stop the waste, like the proliferation of rats and garbage juice and litter. Uh,
Garbage juice.
yeah, man, going out and you just smell that'll ruin my night because it's like we could compost that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I love that you started talking about waste management, because I wanted to hear, from you, what are some of the things that people can do at home in relation to composting that now affects the waste manager, but also on a larger scale, what are some of the things that you are doing that you can share about some of the waste management work that you're aiming towards doing or have already started doing here in the Bahamas?
It's a great question. So basically the best part about composting and separating your waste, it teaches you how you can consume less because you're always seeing what you're throwing away and wasting. I mean, 30% of our food goes to the landfill, and that's $300 million from the standpoint of the country. We could use that. But definitely reusing containers or getting reusable containers helps to clear a lot more space because all of these plastic containers take up so much space. Once you're tracking what you buy, you can see you can buy less, and that really helps with the waste management problem. I have seen cans for kids around the island, and I'm interested in the process of recycling aluminum as well as certain plastics. There's a growing plastic movement in the Bahamas with a lot of people owning 3D printers or into waste management, collecting plastic and experimenting with ways to recycle it. There's so much now. A lot of schools are also getting interested in this sustainability as a whole, whether it's gardening, recycling, and the education is really starting to come together and form some form of system. Like maybe that's not tied to the school system, but it's tied to more culture. And I just love that. Working at the landfill has given me a perspective that there's so much to be done in the communities, and there's so much work to happen. I wish I could talk about one or two things. Like they're incredible, and it's going to be very exciting for the Bahamas once they happen.
I am intrigued. When you mentioned aluminum just now, I literally just scrolled upon a post earlier today where it talked about, it's Easter season and everyone's getting those little eggs that are in that aluminum foil. And so you can't just recycle a little piece of aluminum. They recommended that collect it until it's about, you can ball it up to the size of a little bit bigger than a tennis ball. And I also remember back in the day, we used to smash cans and give it somewhere. I don't remember where it went, but I remember as a kid, that was a thing as well. And so what, if you can talk about that, like what are we doing with aluminum in the Bahamas right now? Like, I don't even know, maybe that is a question more for Cans for Kids, but is that something that people should start trying to collect and reduce and, recycle one day?
I think there's value in just collecting resources because waste, a funny thing about interacting with other composters, like all around the world, some people speak different languages and words have different meanings. And this one student was like, why are we calling it waste? This isn't waste. This is a resource. So I think there's value in collecting resources, even if you may not know the end goal, because that creates an opportunity for someone to create something with. So to answer your question, yes, we should be taking maybe cans and crushing them. I have a small can crusher in my house, and it can crush bottles, it can crush the tall Arizona tea cans, and the tiny cans. So it's very versatile. And once you do that, you reduce the volume. If you go on YouTube and you type in like home aluminum recycling, we have so many innovative people on the island because we're just using what we have. And I think that's the whole point of waste management, is actually managing your waste and not putting it in a landfill.
Yeah, and that literally, you just made me remember this quote that Dr. Ancelino Davis said when I had first started my beach cleanup years ago, there's no such place as away. When you say you're going to throw something away, where is
Wow.
right? Where is that
Yeah.
specifically? Like, to your point, you need to manage your waste. You just don't throw it somewhere and hope that, it just ends up in a place where it won't bother you anymore. Like, you really need to understand what is happening to the trash and the waste that you're throwing away. Like, yes, the dump trucks come and pick it up, but what in there could have been something that could have been a resource in your home, like to compost vegetables and things like that. And so I love that thought and idea. And I'm interested when you mentioned that you've met composters from all around the world. What are some of the things that you've seen other maybe small island developing nations do that we're not doing that you'd like to see us do?
Wow. I'm flicking through all the people who I've met, and I mean,
and feel free to say which countries as well, that you think are doing good things.
I recently met someone from St. Thomas, and they're doing like their PhD in soil science, which is super promising for our variety of micro like biota. Who else have I met? Man, there's so many. In the small island developing states, I think there's hotel composting going on in Trinidad, I believe. There's some permaculture systems in Puerto Rico, or even worm farms. And worm farms are incredible. It's like a giant bathtub that they fill with worms. Yeah. And it's many bathtubs, and they just collect like the worm juice. They have like specific recipes, like they feed them banana plants or coffee grounds and certain things to get like the high quality stuff.
The high quality worm juice.
Yeah.
Interesting. And these are like your typical earthworms? Like what kind of?
I think they're your typical earthworms. From what I can remember, they might have like the Indian night crawlers or the red wigglers. Yeah.
And do we have earthworms?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Right. And I think you were the one who told me that on that last episode. And I was very surprised because I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen an earthworm here.
We have so much remediation to do in terms of our land that like those before they clear a lot down, you can go into that bush and there's enough soil organic matter for worms to be there. I think. I mean, there are worms in our backyards as well, especially when it rains. But I think being able to actually go into bush and study soil, like yesterday, I had a farmer pull me aside and he said, "You have to check this out." So we spent like 20 minutes checking out this mound of leaf mold with all of this hyphae and fungal material. And there were definitely worms in there.
Oh, wow. And I know I see a comment from Lindy. Plenty earthworms are at the retreat. You can see the piles after a good rain. How? The earthworms come out the ground in piles? Like how does that work?
I'm thinking about his poop piles, the worm poop piles. That came out. So the worm poop piles, like they might come out and they might eat. That came out wrong. But
all right.
Definitely, I'm sure they have them at the retreat.
Saying exactly. Fascinating. Wow. And because I wonder, when we think back to, people trying to compost at home and then trying to maybe similar to what you did when you were younger, think about how to really enrich the soil in your yard. Mm-hmm. Would you say being able to see earthworms in abundance is a good thing? Or is it something where, back to that moderation, like knowing they're there is good, having too much is bad? Like, what is that balance?
I personally think earthworms are amazing because they're going to balance themselves out. They can only produce so much as so much food is available. So, and their lifespans aren't that long. And I think earthworms are good in general, but like I don't think anybody will ever get to a point, or there isn't a point where earthworms will be bad. Yeah.
Fascinating. And I know you mentioned there were two types you mentioned earlier about the Indian nightcrawler and the red wigglers, I think you said.
Yeah, they're interesting names. I don't know. I know there's different levels of worms. There are worms that live in the subsoil and worms that live in the deeper soil, and then there's surface soil worms. Okay. But my earthworm knowledge isn't up to date.
And that's totally fine. I'd be more than happy to just ask you later after the show, like as an update even. And I know I see we have a comment, but also a request from Timothy Smith. Thank you for your knowledge of composting and waste management. Would you be interested in doing workshops in Bimini? We have an issue with trash and imports. That sounds like a very good idea.
Yes, I definitely would. I think composting solutions are very unique to the place. So I there was a quote that I can't remember where it came from, but the we are like a body, a community, a city, a town is like a body, and a part of that body is like the health, the digestion system. All of us, like our port would be the mouth where things come in, and the landfill would be, the end where all the bad stuff come out. And we're the digestive tract. We're moving the food and the materials through its use, and we're not recycling it. So we're not super healthy right now. And I think
No.
going to Bimini, understanding the layout of the land and how things work on like a person to person level to really come up with a solution is important. And yeah, that sounds like a lot, and it is, but to get a proper sustainable, truly sustainable, not buzzword sustainable solution takes that type of work.
Yeah. And so I know I have your Instagram handles here, but for the benefit of Timothy Smith and maybe anyone else who's been thinking about it, what is the best way to contact you about this kind of stuff? Is it through those Instagram, or do you have an email that you want to like shout out?
I would prefer people to email me at soulandsoil.earth@gmail.
Okay.
That's a more direct way to connect to me at this point in time. Right now, my Instagram apps, I'm definitely behind on those.
So I did. I popped your email up there for people to see, but also anyone who is on YouTube and Facebook, that is in the comments. Soilandsoul.earth@gmail.com is the best way to get Nicholas to your hometown to come and check out what you guys are doing there. So that's awesome. And I know we talked a bit about other small island developing states that you may have met that are also composting, but as a wider scale, is there a country in particular that you met or admire that is doing composting as a community very well?
Honestly, I love the compost movement in New York, and I hate to see what's happening in there about like community composters and taking money away from them as a city. It's so much politics around composting in the States, and we're just getting to a point where we're understanding what composting is as a country. Not to say farmers haven't been doing it, but as a whole, there's community composting in England and New Zealand. A lot of European countries are very into it. I've met someone from Hawaii, and she composts in primary schools and helps with the local landscaping companies. And I think all of these places are really cool. All of these people are amazing. And we have the community composter forum, so it's composting for the community instead of profiteering compost, which are two different industries. And I can't remember the links, but I'm sure I can send it out later on. Yeah,
that's awesome. And so now I wonder, you talked a bit about the fact that the ports are like the mouth, the landfill is the end, people are the digestive system. So when you think about composting as a country, and you think about waste management, what do you think is the number one, I guess, waste/resource that we should focus on kind of getting a handle of?
Well, maybe I'm biased, but I definitely think composting is the most important resource right now. Food waste. We need food waste and organic matter because first of all, it makes recycling everything else a little bit easier if we want to start backwards. So meaning if we want to take trash and then sort it, instead of having people sort trash and then we just throw it away in the various bins. And it also reduces a lot of problems. It solves a lot of problems in terms of like storm surge. Compost has a very high absorption rate of water. It may help to recharge aquifers. It definitely reduces like the rats, the odor, It saves us money. It creates a product that we can sell. It creates jobs. And then you can go into paper, glass, plastic, recycling much easier because the food is the thing that rots. It makes things gross. You don't want to work with it, you know? Yeah. So
Fascinating. Yeah, and I know we have a question similar to what I just asked, but I love that they put it in a different context. Kolomo Weju Stories, I hope I pronounced that correctly, ask, how can composting and better waste management benefit the Bahamas in the next 5 years, especially when you put it in the context of climate change?
Okay. So right now, waste management is in my analogy, I guess it would be like the kidneys cleaning the blood, cleaning the streets where the cells move through. And we only have so much time left before we have, I guess, kidney failure. Our landfills, we're a small island developing state. Let's keep that in mind. We don't have much land to work with. And we the land that we do have, it's very important that we preserve some form of soil integrity on the land, because hurricanes, if we have no soil, can really easily strip our topsoil layer away. When we have proper waste management techniques, we can recycle that soil, that energy, and keep that soil layer safer. So, and also, it would be great if we had more trees because it gets hot. That's one thing that I realized.
It's
Development. Oh yeah, definitely. Also, landfills have a much higher heating effect instead of compared to composting. I mean, yeah, when you look at the heat maps over landfills, even the most systemized, regulated landfill, the heat map is intense compared to a composting facility.
Wow.
Yeah. So landfilling, waste management, the use of all those machines to make that happen is very inefficient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said a word or phrase earlier that I want to just get you to explain. Soil integrity. When you say that, what are you meaning?
So erosion is a good segue into soil integrity. If you don't have good soil integrity, your soil can wash away very easily. And compost and good soil management practices such as roots and mycorrhizae or fungal counts, bacteria, all of these different things I list have a different purpose in creating a stable soil structure. So you walk in maybe primeval forest and the soil is spongy and it doesn't slip away, it doesn't break, but it catches you. That's a net of roots and bacteria that make glues to keep the soil together and fungi that tie all of that down into like a grid. And it creates a system where that soil can easily collect rainwater and just stop flooding and provide life,
I love that analogy because I have been to primeval forest and I've noticed that, but I never really thought any further than, oh, this some solid, soft ground.
Yeah.
Fascinating, because I definitely have very loose soil. I have to be very mindful not to call it dirt anymore, as per Dr. William Gustav. But I think I am curious now. So is composting the solution to creating that? Like if I wanted to say, like in my yard, I do have a lot of fruit trees where I would like to start seeing better soil integrity. Should I start composting and putting the new fresh composted material around my trees?
I think you should.
It spreads across on its own, or is it that I have to keep going in patches and
That's a good question. I think that's a really good question. I
feel like I'm getting free advice from the Soul and Soil.
You might have to hit us up for a consult. So
I think I might, because I would like to invest in my soil.
Yeah, I mean, it's even with more studies coming out and showing like grounding is very important and like having a nice place to relax outside and breathe fresh air from trees and interact with nature. It's very, very, very important for the body. But you want to start with your trees and protecting your soil layer. So maybe you can start out with organic mulch, and what I mean is something that's not sprayed or has herbicides or pesticides or colored, and that will create um, a barrier for your tree.
Mm-hmm.
It will keep the soil temperature cool and more consistent for the microbes. And you can apply compost. You can apply compost and then mulch. And think of the mulch as like the skin, and that helps to retain that water in the soil. And then we can move on to the rest of the yard, because
Yeah.
once you have a hot spot, they start to like pop up. Your worms are going to be under your mulch, and it starts to
Oh.
spread.
So I was just going to ask what a hotspot is, but a hotspot is where the worms are?
I would, in a hot spot's like biologically, like
Mm.
high biological activity, but not like temperature is different. It's just like if we sampled your soil here and by the tree, there would be a vast difference. Yeah.
Hmm. Fascinating. And I know we do have another comment from D'Angelo. That's the first time someone has made him understand the connection between the trees and soil erosion. So thank you for that analogy. We love when we can teach our viewers. I know I do have a few more questions on this beautiful Easter Sunday. One of the things I want to jump into before I ask you what's next. Now, I know some of my followers may have seen when I posted about you coming and getting that Christmas tree from my office. What happens to these Christmas trees during the post-holiday season when you're collecting them from these businesses, these individual homes, and where are you taking them? What are you doing with them? Can we know?
I've been taking them to my backyard and chipping them piece by piece.
Okay.
What I didn't account for this year was the uptick in composting. There was a lot of projects where I've just been so away from it that I haven't been chipping or shredding as much as I'd like, but I'm creating a mulch and I've been using it and testing it to see if it's viable for composting and growing food. So there's still a lot of trees to chip, but so far they seem to be great for fungi, great with our soil ecology, good for the food, and great for the compost. And just to make sure that what I am giving to people is safe, and
Yeah, man, you got to make sure your reputation stays intact, and I love that. So definitely, if anyone still has Christmas trees in their house,
yeah,
this is where you go. You definitely can hit him up, and he'll definitely be able to help you get that sorted. So now I do want to ask you, what's next? What is next for the Compost King, Soul and Soil? Like, what are you getting involved with? What are some projects that you might want to let people know about? Let us know.
Okay, so right now, as the Compost King, I am open to designing food forests and compost facilities for people. And as for Soul and Soil, we'll be having a launch very soon in terms of collecting waste and creating compost products. Our first product will be compost tea spray, more so a service than a product. We'll be coming in and spraying your yard, which will be a part of the soil remediation that you might be interested in. And in terms of composting, talking to students, having compost workshops, and maybe more posting as well. That's something that I've been working on in the background.
Yeah.
So more posting, more videos, more interaction with the community. And this month, if you know what Project Ice is, on off of Old Trail Road, I'll be teaching some backyard composting classes.
Oh, when does that start?
I'm thinking next Saturday. So I'm doing 2 Saturdays a month to teach people. Yeah.
I wish I knew that. Definitely, if you have a flyer, please share so that we can post it as well. And I do want to touch on something you mentioned just now that I know you talked about in our last episode, but refresh our viewers' memory and probably mine as well. What is compost tea again? Because I know we can't.
Yes. First and foremost, compost tea is not for people to drink. Let's clear that up right now. Okay. So compost tea is a liquid compost amendment that is made from the feeding of the compost microbes. So once you have finished compost, you can suspend it in a cheesecloth bag in a bucket of water, 5-gallon, 55-gallon, 100, 1,000 gallons, and you feed your compost microbiology with sugar. That sugar is then in the form of molasses. That sugar allows them to proliferate and get a very concentrated solution of compost tea. And that's why we call it tea, because it gets warm and it brews. It looks just like tea when you lift it up. It smells very sweet. Like if you have Lipton tea, it's a little stronger than Lipton tea in the smell, but it's that same dark color.
Nice. And I definitely, when I think about, as I was talking about behind the scenes before the show started, when I think about like live episodes or like on-site episodes, I would love to kind of just have a walk with you, like and look at you do some of these cool things. I would chip your wood and like all this fun stuff. So definitely, hopefully in future episodes, we'll actually get to see you do some of the work that you're doing. But I am curious, you did mention those classes that you plan to start soon. So we'll look out for those flyers on your Decompost King page, or will that be on the Soil and Soil?
That should be on both pages.
Okay, perfect.
I will be on both pages and maybe some other pages as well. I'm
It'll
very
be mine.
Yeah,
Definitely. But I am curious, what opportunities that you offer, if any, for people who may want to like maybe learn with you? Do you have sort of like mentorships, internships? Can people volunteer to kind of help you and just like, work with you?
Not at the moment. I'm still working on I guess, standard operating procedure for it. I mean, and from what I've realized with the community composters, they have that guideline, that setup, but it sort of forms organically. And right now, like there's not much left. Just the composting the meat part was something I really wanted to try. I haven't really composted in about 2 years. Securing knowledge, going to these conferences and getting certified. I haven't composted in the Bahamas in 2 years. Let me rephrase that. But going away and seeing how compost is done on all these different scales, there are some things that I'm gonna bring, that I am bringing to this country, and other things that I just had to test that didn't work in the Bahamas, but it's gonna be a very drastic change than how we were doing it before.
I love that. And I do have 2 more questions, but I saw one just come in from a viewer. Timothy Smith asked, do you think if composting were integrated into law and education, it would introduce interest and accountability to our communities?
Ooh.
Good question.
120%. Composting is fundamental, in my opinion. Once you understand the way compost interacts, or we interact with that process, it changes your perspective on life, and how we treat one another, I feel. So and law is, well, I was thinking more like court law, but yes, it's very important for communities that we have like composting law. If you read our laws for certain departments, compost isn't mentioned once in the laws. Oh, wow. So it's a big oversight.
But do we have sort of like legislation surrounding waste management?
We do have waste management legislation. I think there's about 41 different, I guess I wouldn't call them laws, but yeah, 41 different protocols and how you should dispose of your waste. There is something about waste separation. So in terms of sticks, we should be tying sticks in bundles. We should be keeping our waste areas clean. There's starting a business. I believe you have to have a fee to like have a dumpster space. So there's a lot surrounding it, and I think it can be improved. Well, like by a lot.
Improved by a lot. I was surprised to hear that even 41. That's a lot but I definitely can imagine if that's already in place and this is what the country looks like, how much more we need to kind of get to a state that makes us healthy again, makes our country body healthy again. So, fascinating. So thank you for that. Thank you for that question, Timothy. As we start to wind down, I am interested, who is someone in the sector that inspires you and why, whether they're a local person or an international person?
I do have a list. There's a lot of people that inspire me.
You were prepared. I love it.
So I would have to say Gretchen from Hawaii at West Maui Compost, great person. Natasha as well. These are people who I've met from the composting conference. I will have to say Valen Bodie for his soil work and his dedication. Dr. Anselino Davis as well for his work ethic and his mindset. A few people is Matt Cotton, my professor, and Sean, I can't remember her last name, for my CCOM license and training. That was a very, very fun time. Jane Murner Senegal from the Composter podcast and O Town Compost. They also have a podcast, and those are great resources for people who want to learn about composting. Very inspiring, very positive people. East New York Farms. There's also Compost Power, Baltimore Compost Collective, the ILSR. All of these people have been so influential, as well as Happy Trash Can Compost and Compost Queen. Like, there's so many people who I just wish everybody in the Bahamas could meet, because their energy is up there with you guys. You know, it's like everybody is like gelling and talking about compost. It's
Well, I think you can definitely be the vessel that brings that energy to the Bahamas. You're obviously passionate about composting, and through these people that you've met, you're bringing more of that passion, more of that knowledge and experience home. So we are grateful for you as our composting.
Thank you so much. I want to say, like, there's so much to do in the Bahamas, and so many people love it, and there's so many different industries. Like, I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Yeah, I'm excited too. You definitely get me excited to think about waste management and turning our trash into a resource. But for my last question, as we wind down this amazing episode, I am curious, what would be your final thoughts for viewers, someone who's watching who may be inspired to take a similar path or to just be more active at composting, whether it be a quote that you love, a mantra, or even a lesson learned along your time doing this stuff? What would be some final thoughts you'd want to leave to our viewers today?
I think so. I want to do this thing right quick where we like kind of visualize what the Bahamas would be like. So let's imagine a world where we have no trash, we have proper waste sorting. Like, every time you go to throw something away, whether it be cooked food or paper, plastic, or glass, we're putting it into different bins. And we have people in the community who are glass workers, who are making sculptures or glassware, or we have people who are making soil, having community gardens, who are making textiles from the compost that we've grown and making garments or Junkanoo costumes. So there's so much integration that can happen once we start looking at waste as a resource instead of a problem. Being able to go out and not smell garbage juice or have a rat run across your foot or worry about a fly and roach. I mean, let me not lie. The fly and roaches might still be there, but it won't smell bad. Yeah. I think, imagine how much nicer everybody would be if we took pride in our surroundings and how we could treat one another like we treat the land. You know, on Easter, God is risen, Jesus is risen, and coming from a place of gratitude, I think I'm very happy and grateful for what compost has done. And that's the type of visualization I think about as I do my work. And I wanted to share that with everybody.
No, I love that. And I think that helps people put into perspective why you're so passionate about what you're doing. You know, this is the vision that you have for our country, and you're doing the work now to lay the steps to get to that. And so I loved that. That was a beautiful thing to think about. And even I have never really taken a step back and thought about, well, what would our country look like if we just, one thing, which is just take pride in our environment and like this whole turning the waste into a resource and just being more mindful about that. So thank you for sharing that. That was actually beautiful.
Thank you. I'm very happy. Like, as you can tell, just being able to spread that message. I sometimes on the drive home, like, I'll choke up about it. Even now, I think I'm starting to choke up about it. But composting is everything to me, and I want to share it.
And I think you're such an example of someone who has found something they're passionate about, and you are an unstoppable force in that area. Like, you are doing whatever it takes to get the knowledge from international people, to get the certifications, get the licensing, and be innovative. Think of ways to like slowly integrate things into people's lives and be a voice for this as well. Like, 'cause I'm sure as far as the informal education goes, just having you on the show, you've taught me and so many other people amazing things that have stuck with them. I mean, we heard D'Angelo earlier talk about he remembers chicken farming, using chickens to farm for you, and how you've taught them that this is how the trees and the soil help with soil erosion. And so grateful to have you again. Thank you so much for being a guest again on my show and riding the wave with me for Siren Sundays. I definitely look forward to featuring you again in the not so far future to get more of a hands-on look at some of the stuff that you do and maybe actually smell how good your compost smells, which I'm super fascinated about. I'd love to smell compost that smells like baked chicken.
There's going to be some more pleasant smells. The baked chicken one is kind of a new one.
Fascinating. And thank you so much again to our viewers for riding another season with us. Like I said, this is our last live episode for the season. There may be one more coming out, so stay tuned for that, but it will be pre-recorded. So thank you, Nicholas, again for being our last live episode for season 10 of Siren Sundays.
Woo, thank you, Lashanti, so much. Thank you, everybody who came in, and I can't wait for what the future holds.
Yeah. So everyone, have a great Sunday. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, everybody.